you're going, and you win.
We're gonna die out here.
We're not dying!
That I could do anything. That I was better than I am. If he drops it, shoot him. Come on.
The movie begins as several U.S. bombing aircraft approach Japanese territory during the Second World War. Louis Zamperini, a bombardier, leads the mission from his aircraft with his crew. As they spot the Japanese-occupied land, Louis commands the airstrike, and his crew follows his orders.
We are here.
They successfully hit their targets, dropping bombs on the Japanese soil. Just as they prepare to head back, a Japanese fighter plane charges toward them. They engage in aerial combat, but soon face yet another challenge. With their bomb bay doors failing to close, Louis attempts to shut them manually, nearly getting caught in Japanese gunfire. They fight off the Japanese fighter jets, but several crewmates are shot and seriously injured during the attack. Their aircraft sustains heavy damage, and it's a miracle the plane remains airborne. The pilots tell Louis their base is 5 hours away, and they are unsure if the brakes still work, making their chances of survival slim. After a tense flight, they reach the base and attempt to land. Due to the damage, the landing becomes a struggle. The tires screech against the ground, but thanks to Phil's piloting skills, they manage a safe landing. The story then shifts to Louis's childhood. As a boy, Louis was a misfit, constantly causing trouble and running from the police. By the age of 12, he was drinking, smoking, and stealing. As an Italian refugee, Louis faced bullying from American kids his age. After getting into a fight with one, the rest of the group ganged up on him. A police officer catches Louis and takes him home. The officer informs his mother that Louis had been fighting with other kids and drinking alcohol.
Sorry, Louise, he was fighting again. We found this. He painted the bottle. It's liquor.
Louis comes from a typical Italian family that now lives in the United States. His father, unhappy with Louis's behavior, wants him to change, but Louis ignores him. One day at a baseball game, Louis is caught smoking and drinking. To avoid getting in trouble, he runs away, and his brother notices him sprinting at an impressive speed for a kid his age. Pete, his brother, decides to train Louis, believing his speed could lead to something great. He urges Louis to become a runner and gives him all the motivation he can. However, Louis resists, arguing he's not like Pete and can't be a runner. Pete reassures him, saying he believes in Louis completely and encourages him, warning that if Louis doesn't try, he might end up on the streets.
I'm not like you. I didn't even know why you
Yes, you can. If you could take it, you can make it. All right, you train, you fight. Way harder than those other guys.
Touched by his brother's faith, Louis finally starts taking his training seriously. As the years pass, Louis improves significantly and begins winning many races. During one race, another runner trips him, causing him to fall behind. However, with his brother's constant support and motivation, Louis pushes himself, overtakes all the runners, and secures first place. He finishes the 1-mile race in 4 minutes, setting a new American record for high school students at the time. This incredible achievement earns him an invitation to represent America at the Olympics. As he's preparing to leave for the 1936 Olympics, he asks his brother to accompany him. Pete declines, saying he knows Louis won't win. Louis responds that while he doesn't expect to win this time, he plans to show the world what he's capable of at the next Olympics in Tokyo 4 years later. Pete sends him off with the words, "One moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory."
A moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory. You remember that.
With that, Louis heads off to the Olympics. In the Olympics, Louis participates in a 5,000-meter race as everyone from his family in town sit beside the radio to hear him compete. The race begins, and after a few laps, Louis gets left behind, further back than the rest of the runners. Now, as the race is coming to its closure, Louis sprints forward at full speed and runs past several runners. He didn't manage to win the race or get any position to win a medal, but he set a new world record by completing the last lap in 56 seconds. This Olympics was held in 1936, and Lewis had a dream to participate and earn a medal for his country in the next Olympics, which was going to be held in 1940 in Tokyo, Japan. Unfortunately, he was unable to fulfill his dream because World War II started, which caused the 1940 Olympics to be canceled. Now the story moves back to the first scene. After successfully managing to land the aircraft, Lewis finds his pilot, Phil, praying to God. Lewis isn't a believer in God, and he doesn't quite get Phil's faith and is praying.
My mother does that sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of people do this.
Later, Lewis continues his training by running alongside a Jeep. Lewis manages to beat his previous time, but just then he gets informed that he and his team are assigned to a rescue mission.
Got a mission!
Not a combat mission, rescue.
However, the plane that they're using for that mission is made up of spare parts and therefore is unstable. The instability of the plane becomes apparent when one of the engines fails mid-flight. As they're trying to make the best out of the situation, another engine fails, which causes everyone to panic. Their plane is certainly going to crash land. Phil tells everyone to brace for the crash land, and the plane lands into the ocean. The aircraft gets filled with water, and it soon breaks in half. The crash has killed many of the crewmates, and only 3 survive, including Lewis, Phil, and Mac. All 3 survivors get into the 2 inflatable boats. Mac is disheartened by the accident, and he believes their chances of survival are 0 out in the ocean. No one will see them and rescue them. But Lewis and Phil are optimistic and tell Mac to think positively. They have a couple of chocolates and some potable water. Lewis decides that they will eat 1 piece of chocolate in the morning and 1 piece at night, and drink only 2 sips of water a day. He says this is because there's no certainty for their rescue. They all fall asleep at night, and in the morning an airplane flies overhead, and they try to signal it with a dye and a flare gun. Lewis fires several flare guns, but their attempts to get noticed by the aircraft fail, and they are left stuck in the ocean. They all get disappointed, and soon they see that all the chocolate boxes are empty. Mac had eaten all the chocolates at night. This infuriates Lewis because all the resources for their survival were depleted. The 3 struggle to survive in the seemingly endless ocean. They spend a few days without any food or water, and one day a seagull flies and lands on their boat with no option for food. Lewis grabs the seagull by its leg, and they all eat it to fulfill their hunger. Unfortunately, their stomachs cannot hold on to it, and they puke it all into the ocean. Next, they use the same seagull to catch fish and eat it raw. They get something to be happy about. But the following days, they have nothing to be cheerful about and are left discouraged. One night, when all of them are asleep, they all feel their life slipping away from their hands. At that very moment, Lewis prays to his God that if he saves him, he will consecrate his whole life for him.
And then one day it's over. You wake up.
Fortunately, all of them survive the storm, and their water gets refilled by the rain. A few days later, they manage to catch a shark and eat it raw. They notice a plane flying in the air. Lewis fires the remaining flare guns into the air to catch its attention. Just when it seems the plane is going by without noticing them, the plane makes a turn and comes flying towards their direction. Unfortunately, it's a Japanese aircraft that starts to shoot at them. They all jump in the water to save their lives. They all swim deeper into the ocean and dodge the Japanese bullets. But when they all come out of the water, they find that their inflatable boats are damaged. They somehow manage to patch up the holes of one of the boats so that they could remain afloat. And now all 3 of them have to adjust in a single boat, which is quite difficult because the boat is considerably small. Now it's been more than 35 days since they're stranded in the ocean. Mac's condition has gone terrible, and he slowly dies because of hunger. Now only Phil and Lewis are left, but they are both in really bad condition. They aren't able to talk or stand. As time goes on, their situation gets bleaker and bleaker. On day 47, they wake up to see a ship, but unfortunately for them, it's a Japanese ship. They become prisoners of war and are imprisoned on an island. After days without any food or water, they receive a bowl of rice, which they eat hungrily. One day, Lewis is pulled out of his cell for questioning. The Japanese colonel recognizes Lewis as an Olympic athlete. Lewis gets interrogated by the Japanese about the Americans' newer plane models and bomb sites. After extracting information from him, the Japanese eventually shipped them to another prison camp in Tokyo. Upon reaching the camp, Lewis and Phil get separated into this huge crowd of war prisoners. The commanding officer of the camp is very cruel. His name is Corporal Matsuhiro Watanabe. According to Watanabe, all the prisoners are enemies of Japan, and all the prisoners will be treated as enemies. Watanabe catches Lewis glancing at him, and he asks Lewis to look into his eyes. When Lewis looks into his eyes,
Look me in the eye.
he beats him up with a stick, resulting in a bleeding nose. He warns Lewis to never look into his eyes ever again. Watanabe then orders the newly arrived prisoners of war to quarantine until the night. At night, other war prisoners tell Lewis that since they can't use Watanabe's name, they have nicknamed him the Bird. The next morning, all the prisoners are summoned to the ground in front of the commanding officer, Watanabe. He tells the prisoners that there is a talented man, among them an Olympic athlete, Lewis. Watanabe then initiates a race between Lewis and a Japanese. Due to exhaustion and starvation, Lewis loses the race and falls to the ground. After this, Watanabe calls Lewis weak and beats Lewis mercilessly with a stick. The prisoners follow the war through newspapers that are stolen from the Japanese. One Marine draws a map to keep track of American positions. Lewis notices one prisoner who has some of his fingernails removed as he was tortured for information. They all agree not to help the enemy despite what they're put through. The prisoners are subjected to hard manual labor, including cleaning out the latrines used by fellow prisoners and the Japanese army. One day, inspecting their barracks, Watanabe finds the map that one of the prisoners was drawing. He gets mercilessly beaten by Watanabe as Lewis and others stand by helplessly. Later, Lewis tells his friends that he's going to kill the Bird. His friend warns that if he does so, he'll be shot dead. The only way they can win against Watanabe the Bird is if they survive.
I'm gonna kill him.
Then they shoot you.
One day, Lewis watches the Americans attack the Japanese land, which gets noticed by Watanabe. At night, Watanabe wakes Lewis and starts to beat him for no reason. Out of all the prisoners, Watanabe hates Lewis the most. It almost seems as if he has a personal grudge against Lewis. A few days later, some representatives from Radio Tokyo arrive, and Lewis is informed that he has been officially declared dead in America. Watanabe mockingly permits Lewis to announce his survival to his family, and he is swiftly taken to a radio station. There, Lewis tells his family that he is alive, but fabricates a story about living comfortably as a prisoner of war in Tokyo. His family listens tearfully to the broadcast, while Pete, now a Marine, receives a letter about his brother's fate.
This is your Louis talking, and the first time in 2 years that you will have heard my voice. I am now interned in a Tokyo prisoner of war camp, being treated as well as can be expected under wartime conditions.
After the program, the men who brought Lewis to the radio station approach him again, requesting that he speak on air once more, this time reading from a script. Lewis firmly declines, stating that the script misrepresents his country. The Japanese men attempt to persuade him with promises of a comfortable life outside the prison camp, but Lewis remains resolute and returns to the camp. Upon his return, Watanabe greets him with a smile, suggesting that they are both strong individuals who might have been friends under different circumstances. Watanabe then instructs the other prisoners to teach Lewis a lesson in respect by taking turns punching him. The prisoners initially refuse, but when they see that one of their own will be punished instead, Lewis urges them to hit him. One by one, the prisoners strike him, and this brutal session lasts throughout the day. Days later, the American prisoners are forced to perform a play to entertain the Japanese army. Watanabe approaches Lewis and sits beside him, revealing that he has been promoted and will soon leave for another location. Shortly thereafter, Watanabe departs the camp. That night, the camp is bombarded by Allied forces, leading to its destruction. The following day, the prisoners are quickly transported to another prison camp, where conditions are even harsher. While lined up at the new camp, Lewis suddenly collapses upon recognizing a familiar figure, Watanabe. As Watanabe delivers the same speech he gave in the previous camp, he notices Lewis and commands him to look him in the eye. When Lewis fails to comply, Watanabe strikes him on the head with a stick. The next day, all the prisoners are back to work. Here the work is to load the coal onto the boat, which is even more tiring. After a few days, while transferring coal from one place to another, Lewis gets pushed from a high place and breaks his leg. The next day, out of exhaustion from doing his work, Lewis stops to get some rest, but the officer sees him and immediately takes him in front of some wooden logs. As punishment, Watanabe orders him to pick up one and lift it above his head, which Lewis does. Watanabe then cruelly tells the guard to shoot Lewis if he drops the wooden log. The guard gets ready with his rifle as Lewis almost loses his balance and drops the wooden log. Slowly, everyone's attention turns towards Lewis, who's holding onto the wooden log despite losing all his strength under the scorching heat. Watanabe expects Lewis to give up, but Lewis doesn't. Every war prisoner is cheering for Lewis in their low voices, and Watanabe also gives out an expression of uneasiness on his face while waiting for the wooden log to drop. Instead, Lewis stares intently into Watanabe's eyes and lifts the log even higher while shouting in defiance towards Watanabe. The prisoners get encouraged as they see this incredible show of courage. Watanabe slowly becomes furious, telling Lewis to stop looking at him, but Lewis continues staring at him. Embraced by what he thought would be an easy execution, Watanabe attacks Lewis. He beats Lewis mercilessly. At that moment, Lewis remembers the time when he used to run. Lewis has defeated all of his fears. He remembers what his brother told him once, that one moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory. After beating him up, Watanabe falls to his knees in exhaustion. Lewis is left on the spot where he'd been beaten up, laying there unconscious until the night. The next morning, an officer announces to the prisoners that the war is finally over. To celebrate the end of the war, the officer invites them to take a bath in the nearby river. The prisoners immediately think their end has arrived because they think their executions will be conducted in the river. However, after getting there, an American bomber plane passes them, confirming that the war is truly over. The prisoners celebrate in the river. Supplies immediately arrive in the camp, which the liberated prisoners promptly and happily take. But while the prisoners are celebrating their freedom, Lewis goes into Watanabe's cabin. He sees that Watanabe is already gone, leaving behind his cane and a picture of himself and his father. Upon arriving home, Lewis immediately kisses the ground. He finally meets his family after years. In 1946, Lewis got married and later had a son and a daughter. And as he promised, while surviving the storm in the ocean, he devoted his life to God. Phil also survived the war band, got married. Watanabe, on the other hand, hid for several years as a war criminal until the U.S. granted him amnesty to reconcile with Japan. Years later, due to his newfound faith in God, Lewis went to Japan and searched for all the people who were involved in capturing him. Lewis decided to forgive everyone, even Watanabe, but Watanabe refused to see him. Lewis always had a dream to run in the 1940s Olympics, which he couldn't pursue. However, he did fulfill his dream. At the age of 80, he ran with the Olympic torch at Tokyo, fulfilling his Olympic dream. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and press the bell icon for more amazing videos. See you next time.